Hello there. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be looking at the Shroud of Turin. That's a controversial thing, but I believe it scientifically proves the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'd like you to concentrate on the screen because this is really, really interesting stuff. I believe that Jesus Christ left behind him absolute and undeniable scientific evidence of his resurrection. In fact, I think it would have been easier for a fraudulent medieval artist such as Leonardo da Vinci to have designed and launched the Hubble Space Telescope than to have created the Shroud of Turin. The technology to create the Hubble Space Telescope in the year 2009 is available, but the laser technology to create the three-dimensionally encoded photo-negative image on the Shroud of Turin doesn't exist today. So just by word of introduction, I'm a medical doctor, but I retired some years ago, and now I travel around the world giving completely free PowerPoint conferences anywhere in the world. That's my wife there. We have a website, two websites, finalfrontier.org.uk and freechristianteaching.org, and on there are 12 subjects, and there will be 12 DVDs on each of these subjects. What happens after we die? Evangelism is easy. Creation, the Genesis account. Evolution is impossible. The discoveries of Noah's Ark, Sodom and Gomorrah. The Exodus crossing Mount Sinai and the Ark of the Covenant. The crucifixion of Jesus. The Shroud of Turin proves the resurrection. The Bible is supernatural. What does God think about abortion? The pre-tribulation rapture of all Christians in our lifetime. God's perfect plan for our finances, and how to have a miracle. And this DVD and all the others may be freely downloaded, copied and distributed from the three websites, finalfrontier.org.uk, freechristianteaching.org and video.google.com. Right, so on our websites are free downloadable DVDs, free downloadable books, free movies to watch, free conferences anywhere in the world, and free information. A very big thank you to Howard and Leslie Conda of Genesis Revelation TV for so kindly helping in the production of these programs and letting us use these wonderful facilities. All information and images are intended to be used under the fair use clause of the copyright law. Now, there is abundant historical evidence that Jesus actually rose from the dead. Jesus is a person in history, and Jesus himself prophesied his own resurrection in Mark chapter 10. It says, he said, "They will mock him," that's the Son of God himself, "and scourge him and spit on him and kill him, and the third day he will rise again." Now, Flavius Josephus was born in 37 AD and was a Jewish Pharisee, and this is what he wrote. "Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works. Pilate condemned him to the cross, and he appeared to them alive on the third day." So there we have a Jewish historian who said that Jesus Christ died on the cross, a figure in history who died on the cross, and also came back alive on the third day. Now, the Shroud of Turin is authentic and scientifically proves the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to be trying to impress upon you the accuracy of this statement over the next 57 minutes. So what really happened after the crucifixion? Well, the crucifixion happened at Golgotha, the place of the skull just by the Damascus Gate, and Jesus was nailed with three nails to the cross. We have a separate teaching just on the crucifixion. And after he died, the first thing they did was place a napkin over his face. Now, if somebody died on a road near you, somebody would cover the person's face, and that's exactly what they did with Jesus, with a thing which in Greek is called a sudarion, and then covered his body with a sheet called a sindon. And Jesus' body was taken down from the cross and covered in that shroud there, just like that. We'll be looking at that much more carefully in a while. His body was placed in the garden tomb, which was owned by Joseph of Arimathea, and the great stone was rolled across the entrance of the tomb, and the Roman soldiers sealed and guarded the tomb, and used an iron spike to do that. And let me tell you, that iron spike is still there. It's been analysed and shown to be a Roman spike dating from the time of Christ. Jesus, of course, his spirit went to paradise with the repentant thief, but the dead body of Jesus was left behind in the garden tomb for 3 days and for 3 nights. It says in Psalm 16, "For you will not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption." So Jesus' body didn't corrupt in any way during those 3 days and 3 nights. Now, I believe at the resurrection, the Holy Spirit re-entered the dead body of Jesus with a tremendous burst of light with the emission of nuclear radiation. That's a big comment to state, but we've got some scientific evidence later on to back that up. Now, the physics of the resurrection, I believe, was similar to the physics of the transfiguration. And in both cases, the atoms of Jesus' body accelerated to the speed of light, and Jesus actually entered eternity. And the radiation emitted at the resurrection scorched a photonegative image of the scourged and crucified Jesus onto the first century linen cloth with three-dimensional encoding. Now, at the carbon dating, which I'll be talking about, they found excessive carbon-14 on the shroud, and I believe this was caused by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So after 3 days, Jesus came back to life, and both the disciples and the women, they entered the garden tomb, and they saw two separate pieces of cloth. First of all, the napkin placed around Jesus' head, that was placed to one side and folded, and a large piece of linen, which described it with two Greek words, which we'll be looking at, a syndon and an athonia. And that's happened at the garden tomb, which is now empty. There's no body there because Jesus came back to life. That's on the door of the garden tomb. He is not here, for he is risen. Jesus Christ has risen from the dead. Now, there are lots and lots of people we need to give credit to. The official photographer for the Shroud of Turin research project was Barry Schwartz, who set up a fantastic website called Shroud.com. And he and Ian Wilson, who's a historian, have co-authored a magnificent book, The Turin Shroud. And there are lots of other experts, I'll be naming them, but there are photographic experts, nuclear physicists, botanists, archaeologists, historians, forensic pathologists, radiologists, carbon dating experts, textile specialists, and experts in ancient Jewish antiquities. I won't go through all the list of names because we will be naming them. Now, first of all, people say the Shroud of Turin is not in the Bible. Well, it is, but you just have to read the Greek words. You do need to have a look at the Greek words very carefully, and that's what we're going to do now. Now, in a normal Jewish burial, a normal Jewish burial, there were two pieces of cloth. First of all, this sudarion around the face, and the kairos, or bandages, specifically bandages for winding around a dead body, used to wind around the body. So, in a normal Jewish burial, the body was wrapped first in the napkin, described as the sudarion, and the linen burial windings described as kairos. So, for example, Lazarus was raised from the dead by Jesus, and it says in the scriptures that he had this sudarion around his head and the kairos around his body. That's in John chapter 11. It says the dead man came out, that's Lazarus, with his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen, kairos, and a cloth, the Greek word is sudarion, around his face. Now, we know what that word sudarion actually is, because it's used elsewhere in the New Testament. It was actually a towel for wiping the perspiration from the face, or for binding the face of a corpse. Now, in Acts 19, it says God did extraordinary miracles through Paul, so that even handkerchiefs, the word sudarion in Greek, and aprons that had touched him were taken to the sick. So we know what that word means. Now, at the burial of Jesus, two pieces of cloth were used. First of all, I mentioned before, the sudarion around the face of Jesus, and the syndon around his body. So there we have that word syndon. And it's also described later on in the book of John as athonia. So let's look at those two words, syndon and athonia. Well, in Mark 15, it says that that's Joseph of Arimathea, bought fine linen. Now, the Greek word is syndon, and took him down and wrapped him in linen. So let's look at that word syndon. Well, we know what the word syndon means, because like the other word, it's used elsewhere in the New Testament. It says at the end of the book of Mark 14, now a certain young man followed him, having a linen cloth, that's Greek syndon, thrown around his naked body. So it was a large piece of cloth, large enough for Mark. Most people think it's Mark. It actually covered his entire body. So Jesus was actually buried in two separate pieces of cloth, the sudarion around his head, and a large piece of linen described separately as a syndon and athonia around his body. Now we'll look at that word athonia. It's in John chapter 20. It says, Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb, and he saw linen cloths. And on this occasion, the word used is athonia there, with a sidarion around his head. Well, we know what that word athonia is, because like the other words, it's used elsewhere in the New Testament. The word is the derivative of the Greek word athone, which means a linen cloth, and especially a sail. In the same word used in the following scripture, it's in Acts chapter 10. You remember that Peter had a vision, and he saw a great sheet coming down from heaven, knit at the four corners. If you remember, the great sheet had lots of animals in it. Well, the word used is athonia. So we know that the word used to describe the Shroud of Turin is like a great sheet. So now the sidarion around the head of Jesus, actually now in Spain, is called the Sidarium of Oviedo in Spain. And the syndon or athonia around the body of Jesus is what we now call the Shroud of Turin. Now on the Sunday morning, the women were going to come and do the normal Jewish burial, but that took many hours, involved the application of a lot of ointment and spices. Well, they simply didn't do it because Jesus wasn't there. He'd come back to life again. Now we're going to look at the historical authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. Some people think it's a medieval fraud. Well, that's certainly not what other people think. The Shroud of Turin is a piece of ancient precious linen, 14 foot 3 inches long and 3 foot 7 inches wide, and contains the photo-negative image of a man who has been severely beaten and crucified. Now, this is a textile expert called Mechtilde Fleury-Lemberg, and she says that textiles from Masada in Israel are identical to the Shroud of Turin. She's a world-famous authority on historic textiles. She's the former curator of Switzerland Abegg Foundation Textile Museum, and this is what she says. The shroud has a distinctive, exceptionally fine quality Z-twist, a 3/1 herringbone pattern, and a very distinctive joining seam. She says actually the Shroud of Turin is a very precious piece of ancient linen, and the shroud very closely resembles unique ancient textiles found in tombs of the Jewish fortress Masada in Israel. She says that the Shroud of Turin was professionally woven by hand in the Middle East on an ancient Egyptian or Syrian loom. Now, in 1192, was published what's called the Hungarian Prey Codex manuscript. It's been studied an enormous amount, and it does actually display a picture of the Shroud of Turin. It's got the same herringbone weave and the very famous so-called poker burn holes on the shroud. So there we have evidence that the Shroud of Turin was certainly around in 1192. Now, this is important, and you'll see why later on. Mechtilde Fleury-Lemberg specifically discounts what's called the invisible mending theory. There's been a recent theory that there's some additional material added to the shroud. She says that in her professional opinion, no additional cloth has been added to the shroud at any time. There is a very excellent DVD called The Fabric of Time, in which she and many other experts are interviewed. Now, Dame Isabel Pixek is an internationally acclaimed artist, and she's the winner of the Grand Award for Mural Paintings. Now, she says that in her professional opinion, the Shroud of Turin is not a painting. There's lack of emulsion, lack of light focus, lack of directionality, lack of outline, lack of foreshortening, lack of perspective, and lack of distortion. All very technical stuff, but remember, this is a very professional, professionally acclaimed world-acclaimed artist, and she says the Shroud of Turin is not a painting of any description. The Shroud of Turin is actually a mixed photo-negative and photo-positive image. The shroud was first photographed by Secondo Pia in Italy in 1898. Now here we have two images. On the left we have a negative image of Robert Louis Stevenson. On the right, a normal image of Robert Louis Stevenson, what's called photo positive. So on the left, photo negative, on the right, photo positive.